Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Day in the Life. Today, I'm joined by a holistic lifestyle and movement coach, Nikki Dunlop. Nikki and I both took the same holistic health class, which is how we met. But what was interesting was kind of cool was she zoomed into our class, so I never got to meet her for real. And so I'm like excited that we'll have to fix that sometime once the travel craziness is done. But she's also my first Canadian to be on the show, which is kind of exciting for me. And I'm excited to get to know you better. And just welcome to the show, Nikki.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
Yeah. So just kind of starting off, just wanted to hear a little bit more about your background and kind of how you got to where you are and what you're doing now.
hmm Um, well, I started out as an athlete, so I was actually playing college hockey right out of high school, and the school I was going to offered a personal training diploma, which is basically like a 4-year degree in kinesiology, but jammed into 2 years and focused on being a personal trainer. So my athletic background. And then that program is kind of what I would say created the foundation of what I'm doing now. And yeah, that's kind of the educational piece and athletic piece. And then things that have influenced me as I continued. So I was seeing personal training clients, and the things that really stuck out to me that were so interesting is that as people were breathing deeply and moving their bodies, they seemed to share really deeply personal things with me that I wasn't necessarily expecting, or like things they hadn't told anyone. So there was this counseling kind of aspect of it that I knew was involved, but like to the degree that it was happening, I was surprised. And so then I've developed more skills around holding space and processing that, and learning more about the way the body holds emotion and holds trauma and what we can do about that. And my sister was diagnosed back in 2015 with ovarian cancer, and I read the book When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate. And that blew my mind and opened up a whole new world of exploring holistic health and wellness, basically, and have continued to evolve that and learn as I go.
Yeah, the idea that the body holds emotion is a fairly new concept to me, and I'd love for you to talk about what you've learned about that and kind of seen a little bit more.
Yeah, it's it depends. It's different for everyone, but basically, on some level, our physicality can hold on to these traumatic or emotional experiences. So I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Levine's work at all. No? Okay. So that's more around somatic experiencing and processing unresolved trauma in the body. But if we think of animals, if you think of like a deer getting hit by a car, having a fright of some kind, they shake, right after that event. And human beings typically are told to get up really quickly and carry on and move and whatever, and we don't process that. We don't shake, but we can if we're given the space. And so what happens is or what can happen is we start to suppress and repress that in our body. And an easy example is, I guess a question back to you is like, have you ever felt like you're going to cry and then just like not let yourself cry?
Yeah.
Right. And that feels like something in your body, probably. Right. And so where does that go? Where does that emotion go? Right. And so there's lots of breathing techniques and different body work, and somatic experiencing is another one where we can kind of tap into these things that we didn't express, and move them or give them space. And that can create a whole bunch of healing. Yeah. So that's kind of the little bit that comes to mind around that. Yeah.
Yeah, like just realizing that when I feel a certain emotion, like my chest gets tight or like my
Exactly.
stomach clenches, like you read books and those are descriptions of things happening to people, and you
Yeah.
physically experience that. But then yeah, it's just a good point. Like, where does that go? Like what happens after that? It's
Mhm.
we just think of emotions as something so intangible, like it's hard to define what an emotion is. But then yeah, I also was recently exposed to the idea of your organs holding emotions, and then when you do
Mhm.
like a liver flush, then you release a bunch of anger, I think is the emotion, or
Yeah.
fear. And then so I was
Yeah,
like,
you got it.
oh, so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dr. Gabor Mate gets into more detail around um, different, I'm going to say personality styles, but they're really just coping mechanisms or defense stances around, like an example is like being a people pleaser. Well, he's um, put the data together with studies where it's like, okay, people who are people pleasers, like that's really strong for them in their personality, tend to have this particular disease prognosis or diagnosis. And that is totally fascinating to me too, is the ways that we like protect ourselves or like these survival strategies we come up with. um, Eventually we don't need them anymore and they don't work for us in the way they did when we were little, and so then they start to manifest as um, disease sometimes. But,
Yeah, it's super interesting.
mhm.
So for you and your work, what is kind of like a just like a typical day in the life like?
Yeah. I usually start my day with Tai Chi and a walk. So I'll do, um, yeah, Tai Chi practice, sometimes meditation, and then always a walk outside. And that kind of just gets me going, gets me connected to whatever the day is doing, the rhythms of the day. If it's raining, it's like, okay, I think I like to feel that and know that. And then I'll usually, I have a really slow morning. So I like take time and it's my time. It's like that kind of cherished space for myself. And yeah, so I'll have breakfast and read or study or journal. And then I get into different work. So sometimes that's going and seeing clients right away, usually between like 10 and 2 p.m. is when I see them. And then around that, I also teach for a college online. So that's also mixed in there, doing grading or responding to emails or researching different things.
Kind of different activities. I was like trying to think about what do you do with your clients? Like what do you usually do with them?
Mm. It really depends on what they're coming to see me for. Um, I like to use a lot of natural movement. So I'm a big believer that a lot of the time we need to figure out how to move our body before we start adding load to it or adding different apparatuses into the mix. So usually that's a lot of like ground-based movement, crawling, um, proprioceptive work, and then I, I like to make it fun too. We have better response to exercise and movement when it's fun and people tend to come back. So a lot of like hanging and throwing and catching and opportunities for people to do things that they maybe thought they couldn't around lifting different things and stuff like that, all very functional movement stuff.
Do you have a particular niche or favorite area of coaching?
Yeah, I really love working with um, it's getting more specific, but um, people who have been athletes and they might not be in their sport anymore. Um, I can obviously really relate to that experience, but I really appreciate working with these people because typically they have some good awareness of their body. They have some discipline in terms of like consistency and things like that. But we get to work on some of the things like going through this like identity crisis of not being the soccer player anymore, or the basketball player anymore, and we get to do some of this deeper work that they might not otherwise do. And so there's elements of grief in that, right? Like grieving what we did and who we're not anymore, and maybe it's like what we can't do now. So I would say that's who I am really excited to work with most of the time.
I'd love to hear more, like whatever you feel comfortable sharing about that former athlete process, because I was never very athletically inclined, let's say. And so I'd be curious to hear more, like even like what sport you did, and then like what has that process been like for you?
Yeah. So I played a lot of sports growing up, and eventually was able to play hockey, and it became something that I was pretty obsessed with. It's very Canadian of me to be obsessed with hockey, but so I dove pretty deep into it, and switched high schools to be able to go to a hockey academy and improve my skills. And eventually after I graduated, I was like, I really want to go play at a college level, even though I didn't really have any business playing at a college level at that point. Like, I was very driven, but my skill level just wasn't at the same level as the people that I was going to be competing against. And that was in part because I started the sport quite late in life for the sport. So I started when I was like 14, but most of my teammates who would eventually be my teammates, started when they were like 5. So they had this like foundation of skill that I just didn't have yet. But I was really fit and really determined to make it happen. And so I tried out for this team. The coach gave me a shot, which I will always appreciate her for. And basically, at the college that I was at, my first season barely played at all, which is fine. I learned a lot, and I got to have a different role on the team. But after that season, I went on to play every single game for the rest of my career and have a more important role on the team. So basically, my skill level just kind of shot up after that year of excellent coaching and development. And so I played for 5 years for the college that I was at, and we won a couple championships, which was really amazing. And I got to be a captain on the team, which was another like really important aspect for me. And then basically after the last championship we won, which was in my last year, we play the game, we win, and the next day it's all over, right? Like, I'm never going to be on that team again. And so there's no like gradual goodbye. There's no like, okay, we're easing out of this. It's literally overnight. It's done. It's over. And I wasn't really prepared for that. I built my whole life around this kind of archetype and this person. And so then that was just gone. And that is really interesting to wrestle with as an athlete. And for women in particular, in this particular sport, and most sports, I would say, there isn't other avenues. There isn't a ton of other avenues to continue playing. Men have a lot of other professional opportunities. And at the time, for me, that wasn't a realistic prospect. And so it was just over. So then it's just been like years of kind of processing that and kind of being with that loss, I guess, of sport and team and, purpose. That was a bit of the journey.
Yeah. So like, I feel like with other sports, I've heard of local leagues or something that you can join. But then if my husband's a tennis coach, and when we go on walks and stuff, and he used to also play baseball kind of professionally, semi-professionally in his country. And So he'll see like the teams playing. I think he has a hard time with the idea of doing it and like holding back that competitive side, I guess. Is that kind of what you feel like, or are there hockey leagues that you could do?
Yeah, I totally, I think I do really relate to your partner on that. Yeah, my first year after finishing at the college level, I was like, I can't play at a lower level. I'm way too intense, and I'll just probably get upset. And so I just took a year to kind of cool off, and still um, went out and was on the ice every now and then. But and then after that, when I was still in the other province, where a lot more women play hockey. Um, I was playing in a league that was amazing because most of the women had played at like a college or professional level, finished, came home to that province, and then we're all in this league together. So the level was really high, but everyone was like really relaxed about it. So it was really fun. And then when I moved back to Vancouver Island, where I am now, there isn't the same volume of people playing, and so it's kind of that. I haven't found the right fit of like where I can play and yeah, have it flow for me. So I've kind of let it go, and also found other sports and things that I like to do that are outside and in nature, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. And would you say you were talking about um acquiring the skill level with hockey? Is it because you're also just like on the ice? Like, was it the ice skating component of it, or what was kind of the difficulty with like the age, like starting later?
Yeah, some of it was just my on ice skills in terms of skating and um, stick handling and different tactics and things like that of the sport. I just didn't have the same volume of practice as my teammates did growing up. So that was one thing. Um, I think the quality of coaching that I received wasn't the same caliber. So it was like in 1 year of being coached by my coach at college, my skill level, I would say, like increased by like 50 to 80%. So I was also around a lot better hockey players, which is like encouraging and inspiring for me. And then I just got more detail and attention and feedback on how to improve my game. And it worked. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah,
Hmm.
I well, maybe just because I've always lived kind of in southern places where hockey's not a big thing. Like I didn't even know like a hockey academy was a thing for like not even like a college student. Like what kind of what is that like?
Yeah. So that was in high school, and basically, I mean, I know that they have them in different parts of the states as well, um, where some of your like school credit is practice. So it's like my class every day of the week. One of my classes every day of the week was hockey. And so I would be on the ice 3 days a week and then 2 days off ice training with the academy. And so that was pretty sweet as a high school student. Just like that was one of my classes. And at the time, I wasn't super into what I was learning in on the academic side of things. So I took other like physical education classes as well. And so sometimes my whole day was just phys ed, basically. Like I'd be playing hockey or yeah, in a more generic phys ed class.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And I know like the life of a student athlete is like a whole thing too. Like, kind of what was that like in college?
Yeah, that was it's fun to reminisce about this. Going into being a student athlete, I mean, I wasn't prepared for the demand academically and athletically. And so in my first semester, I almost failed out of school, or out of like I have to keep a certain GPA to be able to play hockey. and I almost failed out, and that scared the crap out of me. So following my first semester, I maintained a really high GPA, and it kind of kicked me in the pants to like um, buckle down and focus. And I was fortunate enough that my coach really saw the importance of the academic side of things and personal development side of things. So she had an even higher standard than what our league did for GPA, which was stressful, but also encouraged me to do better and be better and take it seriously. So that demand was a lot. We practice every day, Monday to Thursday, and then we play Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday is our day off usually. And so it was 5 years of a full academic course load plus that, and then at times like I was in the last 2 years of that I was also working, so it was a lot to juggle, a lot to balance.
For sure. And when did you really like start with your coaching? Was that while you were like in college or like after college?
Yeah, I started when I was in college. So after I was certified, which it was after a 2-year program, I started seeing clients at the gym at the college. And that, so that would have been back in 2012 that I started seeing personal training clients. And then what I do with people has evolved pretty tremendously since then. And I've taken a couple breaks in there from it. But that's when I started.
What have you kind of learned as you've been going through that process? I mean, you said you've changed your style a good bit,
Mm-hmm.
and what are some of the things you've learned?
I think one of the most important things that I've learned is um, that the most valuable thing that I can bring to a session is just my presence, just full presence with the person that I'm with, and holding space. So it's really important for me to be really clear with people that everything's allowed with me. It's like, if you're angry, let's talk, let's see it, let's talk about it if it's there, right? Like, so just that container for people to be exactly who they are on that day. And compassion in that. So that's kind of the most important thing. And then the ability to go with the flow. Like I can come in with the most perfect program design in terms of holistic lifestyle coaching or personal training, and then I have to be able to think on my feet and change the plan based on what's actually going on in the moment, and letting go of my attachment to an agenda, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So you might have just said this, but I'm curious to know what you found most challenging as a coach.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it is the attachment for me, it's the attachment to really wanting someone to thrive and do well. Um, and knowing that, you know, there can be fairly simple, or what I like to call like low hanging fruit things we can do that make a big difference. And when people aren't willing to do that or prioritize that, I find that really challenging. And I'm still willing to be there and hold space. And I have to again let go of my own agenda. But I think that is I want people to feel good and feel well and live, to their fullest potential too. And when they continually kind of I don't want to say, I'm going to say sabotage, but when they sabotage that, or they don't prioritize their own well-being, I frustrate myself with that. So that's a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you find rewarding about what you do?
I think I have a client that I saw this week, and she has been going through a lot over the last couple of years. And one of the things she said to me, she's like, of all the things that I've done in the last couple of years to like help take care of myself, what I've been doing with you has been the most helpful. And I find that so rewarding, because sometimes I can, doubt myself and be like, what are we even doing? Like, are we even getting anywhere? And so to have that reflected back to me is really, really valuable. And yeah, I find that really rewarding. And then just to be able to be a space for people, to be able to show up exactly as they are. I realize that not everybody has that in every area of their life or many areas of their life. So that's really, really valuable to me as well. And I appreciate getting to do that for people.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean, I know that recently I kind of had to go be social, and I wasn't feeling like being social, and I was kind of like, do I just pretend like I'm feeling okay, or do I just like show up miserable? And I did something kind of in between where I was like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really being my best self right now, but I'm not being as terrible as I feel like being. And it was really nice that the person like was just kind of there and like kind of was just there for me. And then I finally started to feel a little just better, just because that person just seemed very like, just I could just sense they were just accepting me at how I was. And I think that's super important to
Yeah.
definitely have. Like, I love that that's what you're mindful of that for people.
Yeah. Just the relaxing that can happen in the body when it's like, dude, just be exactly how you are. I'm going to love you anyway.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Well, we don't have enough of that around, or don't hear that often enough. Just be
Mm-hmm.
who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like everything seems like it's conditional, like our friendship is conditional on you always being amazing, or whatever it is.
Yeah. 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 It's such a relief when people are like, you know, I want you to show up exactly as you are, and you don't have to be a certain way to be here, to join us, to be a part of this. And it's like, oh, thank you.
I can breathe.
Right. So exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that I love being able to be really radically honest about things and where I'm at, and be able to receive honesty from other people too. So yeah.
Yeah, the more I've started doing that, the more I just feel better, and the more like other people are actually also able to be honest about how they're feeling too, and it's nice on both ends, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's that um idea that like being vulnerable is the like stepping into um putting ourselves in the potential of harm, right? That's what it means. It's like it might be harmful, but most often it's quite connecting.
Yeah.
um and we forget that, but or I do sometimes, but it can be really, really powerfully connecting.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times I have a pretty active imagination, and so then I actually imagine worse things that actually do happen when I'm vulnerable. Like if I'm like, oh, if I'm vulnerable, this and this will happen, and people will treat me this and this way, and then actually when I am, it usually doesn't happen. Like usually people are actually like receive it really well, and then if they do react the way I think they might, then I've already thought about it. Or it's usually just not as bad as I think it's going to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like we prepare ourselves for the worst because we somehow think that that's going to stunt the like shock or the blow from it, but usually it just prolongs the
Yeah.
painful experience of imagining all these terrible things, right? Yeah.
Right, totally.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so one thing that like when we were just talking about this, you kind of mentioned that you wanted to talk about grief a little bit more, and that's what you said you were talking about with your clients. And I guess I was kind of just wanting to know, what have you found helpful in the process of working through grief?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things to note is that around grief is that it's a skill, right? And it's a skill that most of us aren't taught, right? If we think about what I mean, often the first thing that people think of when they think of grief is like a funeral. Okay. So a funeral happens, and the people who have like had this loss in their life are expected to show up, dress nice, talk about all of this stuff, all within the first like week of it happening. They're probably not even embodied. They probably are still in shock. Like there's all these layers of disconnection from the process. And to me, learning to grieve means learning to love and appreciate and honor that which we're grieving. And it's similar to loving well. It's like a lot of us, take on our programming from our parents about how to love, right? Or what does love mean? Because love is many, many different things. And grief is this other one where it's like, okay, we have a funeral and then we forget about it and try to move on. And that never sat well with me. And as I went through, watching basically my sister progressively get more sick and then eventually die, it became very important to me to really give myself the space to feel all of it. And grief isn't just, being sad and low and depressed. And in that, it's like I said, loving and appreciating really fully the person or the experience or the situation that we've lost or moved on from. And some helpful resources for me. One of the things I did was I went to an actual workshop on grieving, and we did a lot of ritual around letting go and saying goodbye and storytelling and anger expression. So really safe anger expression where we don't let it get to violence and we just get to say and move energy. That's really important. So if we can create more containers for that type of expression. And then self-compassion is another important resource. So there's a book called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff that I think self-compassion lends itself to grieving really, really well, because often when we're grieving, we don't have the same capacity to do and experience and show up the way that our life probably asks us to. And having compassion for ourselves through that is essential. It's like, yeah, dude, your sister just died. Do you really expect yourself to be able to show up for these people in this way? Like, it makes sense that you're having a hard time or that you're exhausted, or, creating space for that. And then there's an author and a speaker and a shaman named Martin Prechtel. And I can send you his name spelled out if you'd like, but he has a series called Grief and Praise. And it's a more recent resource for me, but I've been really enjoying it and listening to it over and over. And I just think that would be another really powerful resource to share with other people.
Could you talk more about it?
Yeah. So in the audio of him speaking about it, he talks about how we can only grieve that which we have praised, right? So even in praise, if we think about, for example, if I was like, Rachel, you know what? You're a really amazing person. I really love the way you show up. I love that you're doing these things for yourself, storytelling, podcasts, different learnings, your real gift to this world. In that, there is in that praise, there is also grief, because like it or not, one day you're going to die and you're not going to be here in this form anymore. And so when we grieve or praise really well, there's also grief in that. And when we grieve, we only grieve the things we really love and praised, right? Like the reason why my sister's death is so hard for me is because I love her. And I think, like, growing up, she was everything. She was what I looked up to. She's my older sister. And she was special to me for so many reasons. And so that makes it harder. Grieving the loss of my like hockey career and my team and my coach, and that whole process, that was really meaningful for me. I know why that was so meaningful for me. And it's hard, and the grief is hard, and it's thick because it meant so much to me. So Martine Prechtel talks about these ideas of grief and praise, and that we have to create spaces for expression. He talked about not medicating expression. So it's like, if people heard the way that I like weeped and screamed and whatever after my sister passed away, they'd probably think I'm crazy and need to go to a hospital. But he talks about, in his culture, he's a Mayan native, and then from Guatemala. And he talks about it. He's like, when we hear people weeping, crying, pulling their hair out in grief, we listen. We go listen. We're not saying, oh, that guy's, something's wrong with him. It's like we listen. And I guess that's a really important piece too for me, showing up with clients, if we're looking at it through that lens, is being that space to be able to listen. So those are some of the things from his work that I've really appreciated.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that, because I've been reflecting on some of the grieving processes that I've gone through recently, and and sometimes like I weigh the amount of grief that I had, like I grieved more for this breakup than I did for the loss of a relative who I knew my whole life, something like that. And it's like I feel, you feel, I don't know, just like I've felt guilty about like the length of grief that I've allotted to different areas, or not allotted, because you don't really consciously allot a grieving process, I don't think, but sometimes we're kind of told to, I guess, I don't know. But just the amount of time that I've expressed, like I've felt grief for something, it varies, and having an understanding, I guess, the value, I don't know if value is a good word, but like I like how much, like that idea of like you've praised something so much, but then when you've had that loss, it's kind of like it can vary.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not something that we can control either. So it's not like for a breakup and a relative loss, you can be like, oh, I'm gonna feel more for this person who's now dead than this breakup. It's like, it doesn't work like that. And the other thing too, when we're talking about grief, is that we're never just grieving that person. It's like, I've had intense experiences of grief that have shown up through body work that I've done, and I have no idea what it's about. I could make up some stories, but I actually have no idea. And just knowing that when it comes, and let it flow, like let it flow, and trust that what needs to come through will come through.
Yeah, like that better out than in.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess on a maybe lighter topic, what do you do outside of work to decompress?
Yeah. I normally do quite a lot of mountain biking, which is really fun for me. I wouldn't call it necessarily decompressing because it's fairly intense and high energy, but yeah, that I mean, being out in nature is like another one. I'm fortunate enough to be near a lot of really beautiful beaches and have access to all kinds of different things here on the West Coast that um, I've come to learn are hard to come by in other parts of the world. So getting to engage with that is really lovely for me. I recently have started playing Scrabble with my partner, and that's been really fun because I unexpectedly am like quite good at it, and
Nice.
so that's been really fun. But yeah, connecting with friends and playing games, and another couple of my friends just had a baby, and so getting to be an auntie to him is really exciting and fun for me.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's something you're really passionate about?
Hmm. I I mean, not to bring it back to grief, but I'm pretty passionate about grief and just feeling in general, creating space for expression, um, and using movement as a modality of that expression of anger. Um, yeah, I guess expression of our inner world, um, moving away from the suppress, repress, depress, and into the express, um, is is something I'm pretty passionate about. I'm really fascinated um, by a lot of what we're learning or what I'm learning through the Czech Institute. It's been this place where I get to connect a lot of the dots from other areas of learning that I've done around like Chinese medicine and the chakra systems and the body and the mind and connection. So those are some pieces. And then the other thing that is really exciting for me is getting to um, help people communicate more effectively, to be able to notice sensations in their body and be able to say like, okay, I feel tight. And then, we have interpretations of what that means and get to share that and creating more opportunities for connection that way.
Yeah, that's so important.
Mhm.
And when you were talking about the example of like how Guatemalans express grief and they actually like listen, I got like chills. I was like, that would just be just having more of that is it just sounds so powerful. Like it's because like just having, I guess, somebody to recognize and listen to your grief and not just be like, oh shush, go cry in a corner or something.
Mhm.
I haven't been
Mhm.
told that before, but that's just and I feel like that's just kind of how I don't know society sort of like this society is
Mhm.
kind of been designed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. A really great question is like, do you make sound when you cry
Ooh,
about anything?
I try not to.
Interesting, right? And
So
so what happens to that vibration, right? What happens in the body when we don't make sound? And I mean, I don't want to scare people, but like that's that's expression being suppressed for some reason, and probably a good reason that you had from when you were a kid, and many of us have that.
mhm.
Um, and we know the sound of grief and weeping and sorrow. That's the other interesting thing. In Ireland, they still have um, people in their community who are called keeners, and they'll just start making these sounds at a wake for somebody. They make these sorrow sounds that are really real for them, but they're not connected to the people at the wake necessarily in terms of like knowing them. And it like starts the weeping and sorrow and everything for everybody.
Yeah, I've heard of that. No, I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier, but I didn't know what it was called. I think I've read about it before. I feel like, yeah, having that can help really open it up for other people, like showing that it's accepted and okay.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's the other thing, is creating space for us to share, even if I'm not um, explicitly sharing what's gone on for me, or what I'm grieving or have sorrow or sadness about. But if I get to witness somebody else sharing and feel my own experience, and maybe I cry or whatever happens, so much processing and healing goes on just from witnessing and helping create the container for other people, that I think there really needs to be more space for that to happen. And that's something that I'm like keen to create in my circle and in my world, is these spaces for that expression.
Yeah, what are some of your ideas for how to create those spaces?
Yeah. I think what one of my teachers talks about, how energy flows best in a container. And what she means by that is, like, if you take like a vacuum, for example, and you take the nozzle off the end of it, or you even take the hose away, how forceful is the like suck of the vacuum? It's not, right? It's too open. But as soon as we have that container, the force is a lot more powerful. And so I think one of the big things is creating that container, which means having some boundaries around what it looks like. It's like, okay, inviting people to I mean, sometimes that's confidentiality of like what gets said here, what gets expressed here stays here, and feel free to talk about your own experience, but don't share someone else's. um, Things like time boundaries. It's like, okay, you're going to have 2 minutes to express whatever you need to express, and then we'll stop you. So things like that can help create the space. Obviously, consent from everybody there. It's like, we're going to do this thing. Are you okay with that? Yeah. If you need to leave, will you leave? Yeah. Will you let someone know? Like those kinds of things, those kind of logistical things, but that can create safety, I guess, in the experience, because it is very vulnerable, to share, but then also to express. It's like, I don't know what's going to come out of me. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thanks so
Mhm.
much, Nikki, for coming on the show. This has been a really great conversation. If people want to follow you or get in touch, how can they do that?
Yeah. On Instagram, you can find me at Life Force Movement, but spelled MVMT. And then my website is lifeforcemovement.com, or lifeforcemovement@gmail.com. You can email me that way.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure having you, and thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single show. Interested in being on the show? Know someone that might be a good fit? Use the nomination form in the description.